Modern American poetry. Generally, we think of the 1900 as the beginning of this age. How was it different? It was a total breakaway from the earlier poetry. The previous century, when we think of British poetry, we talk of the Victorian age. How was it different? No adherence to structure. There were diverse themes, most important being that of alienation. There's also realism, and we're moving away from the external world to internal thoughts. Writers who come to mind, for example, are Langston Hughes, T.S. Eliot. Of course, we put T.S. Eliot both in British and American literature. Sylvia Plath, 1932 to 1963, was a novelist, a short story writer, and a poet. When we think of her poetry, the first word that comes to mind is confession, because she popularized what we call confessional poetry. Having the courage to write about the violent emotions that rack you. There is despair in many of her poems. Daddy's troubled poems, Bell Jar, Letters Home, etc. Again, hers was a sad life because she fell prey to severe depression and also attempted suicide a couple of times before she finally did die by suicide. Morning Song was written in 1961, soon after the birth of her child. A child she looks at sleeping and the confused thoughts of the new mother. One could say that this poem is about pregnancy, it's about birth, it's about motherhood. But let's remember, it's also about the feeling of postpartum blues. And hence, the entire poem has a melancholic tone. Let me read the poem to you, probably in parts. Love set you going like a fat gold watch. The midwife slapped your foot soles, and your bald cry took its place among the elements. Generally, when one thinks of a newborn, all beautiful ideas and thoughts and images probably flood your mind. But here is a confused mother. When she looks at her child, what she thinks of is a fat gold watch. Seems a little cruel, seems a little unlikely description, but what she's talking about here is the totally mechanical feeling of giving birth. Probably the hospital room, the operation theatre, nothing is beautiful and natural here. And we all know that the child has to cry so that its lungs become clear. And therefore, the midwife slapped your soles, she says. And then the bald cry. It seems as if she's a little confused. No, not at all. Sylvia Plath here draws our attention to the cry being raw and loud and probably tuneless, anything but musical. And she goes on. Our voices echo, magnifying your arrival. New statue in a drafty museum. Your nakedness shadows our safety. We stand around blankly as walls. Nobody knows what to do. This new arrival here. So she's comparing it to almost to a statue, almost lifeless. And we're all standing there because we don't know what to do. We don't know how to interact. It seems as if everybody is as much at a loss as the new arrival. There's a total lack of interaction among the people who are there. And then she continues, I'm no more your mother than the cloud that distills a mirror to reflect its own slow effacement at the wind's hand. Maybe as you grow up, maybe in later years, I will feel that connect with you. But at this moment, I'm not even your mother. What she's trying to say is this relationship which will grow as you grow older. And as we probably get used to each other, that's yet to happen. That's going to happen in the future. But now, I seem to be like a cloud which is reflected in a mirror. There's no connection between the two. That's what I feel here. Than the cloud that distills a mirror to reflect its own slow effacement, to rub out. Rub out here, the relationship, the connection between you, my newborn, and me, your mother. All night your moth breath flickers among the flat pink roses. I wake to listen. A far sea moves in my ear. You know, the poem actually on first reading might strike us as being a little disjointed. What are these pink roses that she's talking about? Probably she's talking about the bedspread. Maybe there are flowers there, otherwise there can't be roses in the hospital room. But she says, all night your moth breath. A new mother is not even sure whether her child is breathing. And probably as a mother, she's constantly tense about whether everything is okay with the child. So she probably puts her hand, her fingers to see whether the child is breathing. So she waits to listen. But there seems to be so much of distance between you and me, she says. I feel alienated, and therefore a far sea moves in my ear. The breath, the sound of your breath seems to be coming from somewhere far, far away. One cry and I stumble from bed, cow heavy and floral in my Victorian nightgown. Your mouth opens clean as a cat's. Here, of course, is her nursing her newborn, and therefore she calls herself cow heavy. But she's tired. She's just given birth, and therefore she's stumbling. The window square whitens and swallows its dull stars. And now you try your handful of notes. The clear vowels rise like balloons. By now, I've got used to your cry. I'm your mother. I feel a connect. And therefore, it's no longer a bawled cry, but it becomes musical notes. I think it's beautiful how the relationship between the mother and the child is being traced here from a total sense of alienation to a certain sense of belonging, of ownership, of possession, of possessiveness maybe. A beautiful poem, but we need to pause and think about the feelings of the new mother. The poem is melancholic, the tone. The verses are short, but I think the entire poem is filled with figures of speech. So can we have a quick review of figures of speech that we already know in ever so many poems that you've been reading and listening to? Alliteration, simile, metaphor, assonance, personification, caesura. Oh my God, all of them are there. And it might be great fun to challenge your friends maybe to find them for you. But I'm now going to talk about a new figure of speech, and that is synesthesia. We know of the 5 senses, and we know that each one of our senses has a particular job. So I say, I look or I see with my eyes, I hear with my ears. Perfect. But have you had the feeling of looking at a painting of the snow-clad Himalayas and you feel a shiver? What is it? Your eyes are looking at the snow, but the touch, your skin can feel the cold of the ice, of the snow. This is synesthesia, where one sense impression gets transferred to another. Isn't that interesting? So can you look at the last line of the poem, which says, "The clear vowels rise like balloons." Vowels, sound. You should be listening to it. You should be hearing it. But she beautifully says the vowels rise, because we are talking of the musical notes, remember, of this child, which now no more has a bald cry. And so what happens? The vowels rise like balloons. Isn't that beautiful? This poem is about a new mother. Honestly speaking, there are very few poems written about motherhood, the feeling of being a mother. But there are poems which show relationship. Maybe you could read a poem about a mother to a son by Langston Hughes, and other poems on the relationship between a parent and a child. But read this poem again to understand what motherhood is all about, especially when you are a new mother.